Greetings, fellow teachers. My name is Tom Love. Welcome back to Basic Mathematics using the Garden Approach. This session will be on data analysis, specifically measures of central tendency. We will investigate and study mean, mode, median, and a measure that's not basically a central tendency called range, but it's very important to understand how the numbers spread out, and the range does that for us because it takes the difference between the high and the low scores. Well, let's get started and take a look at these measures of central tendency. All right, now statistics is organization and summation of data. Statistics also involve data collection and analysis. There are plenty of sources for data: surveys, opinion polls, student values that they collect and organize. Traditional classes, we have all types of interactive resources, being textbooks and maybe actually little games the students can play to take a look at statistics, but there are certainly a lot of contemporary websites with virtual resources. Now, let's take a look at a very simple set of data and take a look at the mean, mode, median. We can almost just tell the information about it. Now, the data in this case is odd, and the data is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a little simple thing. Now, definition for mean, it's the sum of the numbers divided by the count of the numbers. The mode would be the most frequent number, in case we had a whole bunch of them, which one showed up the most. And the median would be the physical middle. We would just spread them out and then put our finger on the one in the middle. The range, of course, is the difference between the high and the low, and it's the spread of the data. All right, now, if we were to find the mean of this particular set of data, if we added them up, basically what would we get here? We would get 5, 10, 15. So we get 15 is the sum. We divide by 5 numbers, so our mean would be 3. And you see, you calculate the mean. The most frequent number in this case doesn't work because all the numbers happen once, so there wouldn't be any mode. All right, now the median is physically the middle number, and that's easy because it's odd. There has to be one in the middle, and that's 3. So do you see, just with a small set of numbers, we can actually find the mean, mode, median. Now the range, of course, is the 5 minus 1, which turns out to be 4, and that's the spread of the data. So it's important to kind of basically take a look at this measures of central tendency and the range. All right, now let's do the same thing with an even set of data, which turn out to be a little bit trickier when we don't have a physical middle. Now the sum of the numbers divided by the count of the numbers again will be the mean. So the sum of the numbers would be 8 and 8, that would be 16. So we divide by 4, and that gives us a mean of 4. Now, do you understand there? The mean is actually not part of the data. It's a calculated number. It does not have to be one of the numbers. And again, the mode doesn't exist because all the numbers only happen once, and the physical middle is not there. But given an even set of numbers, you actually take the two that are in the middle, which in this case is 3 and 5. You add the two middle numbers together and divide by 2 and find the average, and that turns out to be 4. So do you see, we actually can determine a median if it doesn't happen to be a score. And again, the range is the difference between the high and the low, which tells how the data spreads out, and that's 7 minus 1 in this case, which is 6. All right, now statistics is an important class activity for all curriculum areas because it's good to collect data no matter what area we're in: language arts, social studies, science, and mathematics. Statistics, although, is a major area of mathematics, and that's where it's studied in great detail. Statistics is so important, it is common knowledge and expected everybody should know something about it. Some other sources of data would, of course, be newspapers, magazines, television, and, of course, the Internet and the World Wide Web would supply some data too. We always have to be careful about the authenticity of our sources, so that would be a critical feature of data analysis here. All right, now, here are some collection of raw quiz scores. Raw because basically the students just took the scores and we've got them here in a big pile. We haven't organized them. We've collected them. Now we need to organize them. Now the best way to organize them is to set up a table. So we set up a table and we put basically maybe the numbers from ranking them, the high to the low, and then we would tally them up and find the frequency. And then, of course, we want to end up with multiplying the number times the frequency, And that's basically what we want to do when we organize them. Now, by tallying them up, we mark them out. Now, let's just, for instance, let's pretend a little bit here. Let's tally up the sixes, how many sixes we've got. Now, we've got them organized here in our table. We've got 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and so on. We're going to find out the tally for the number 6. And you tally by marking through the sixes. All right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sixes. All right, now let's go backwards and repeat the tally using an opposite mark to make sure we have found all the sixes. So we're going backwards now. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 7 sixes, and that's our tally. You see that? That's very important to tally them up and then repeat the tally by going in the opposite direction using an opposite mark. That ensures accuracy, at least as best we can. All right, now let's take a look at these quiz scores again. Now, when we make our table, like we mentioned in the other slide, we basically rank the numbers, all right, which is here. We tally them up, which would put down our marks. We change the tallies to a numerical value, all right, and then we find some sub-products here, and then we end up adding all these up. It's much easier to add up these and add up all the particular numbers one at a time. So actually find the sum of the numbers here in that last column. But we rank the numbers, we tally them up, we change the tallies to a numerical frequency, then we multiply the number itself over here times the frequency, which is a numerical value. We find subproducts, and then we add those up to find the total. So we change the tally to a numerical value. We find subtotals by multiplying the actual score times the frequency value numerically. And here we have it. We have our table. Do you see where we have tallied all the numbers? All right. Right here we've tallied them. Here we've ranked them. All right, and the tally is we found 2 9s and 4 8s and 5 7s and a bunch of 6s and a bunch of 5s and some 4s and 3s and 2s. This is our tally. Now we change the tally over here to an actual numerical value. That would be our frequencies. Then we multiply the number score times the frequency, and of course 2 times 9 is 18. 6 times 7 is 42. And then 4 times 3 is 12. You see, it's a lot easier to find those. Now, it's much easier to add up these subtotals over here, and then we find our total of all the scores. Of course, using calculators would help a lot too. But the tally is a very important one. Remember, we did that twice to make sure we've got them all. And of course, the tally should agree with the frequency when we add those all up. Now, that works out pretty good. Now, let's take a look at this data. Do you notice that I basically have a mode here of 6 and 3. 6 and 3 actually turn out to be the mode because they happen the most, which is 7. All right. Now to find the mean, I would take the 191 and divide by 36. And the median, there's an even bunch of numbers, so the median doesn't really have to exist, all right, as a score. But if you notice here, here's a 6 and here's a 5, and they are the two middle numbers. So if I take the 6 plus the 5 and divide by 2, I actually get the median. All right, now that's a nice way of analyzing the data, but now let's go and look at all that calculations. Let's review now the basic descriptive definitions for mean, mode, median. Sum up the numbers, divide by the count. Determine the most frequent by your tallies, and then determine the physical middle if possible. And of course the range would be the difference between the high and the low. Okay, those are the definitions. Now here are our calculations. Remember, the sum was 191, so we divided by 36, and the mean is 5.3. It's a calculated value. It is not an actual score. There were two modes, so that's called a bimodal distribution, or two modes. Now our mean, there was not a physical mean because remember we had an even set of numbers, so we took the actual two numbers that were in the middle, add them together and find their average, which is 5.5. So the 5.5 is the median. It's a calculated value also, and it's not actually a score. Our range is basically the high and the low, the difference between them, which is 7. That actually shows us the spread of the data, and a fancy word for that is called dispersion. So do you see? Data analysis is not bad at all. Students should collect a bunch of data, whether they're weights, whether they're masses, whether they're IQs, whether they're test scores, quiz scores, and actually analyze the data by putting it in that simple table and coming up with these measures of central tendency. All right, now, in conclusion, we should basically have students constantly do little experiments where they collect data. They can actually go out and collect data with a paper clip, not paper clip, but a big paper and a clipboard was what I was after there, a clipboard and a paper on it, and ask questions and gather up information that, a student poll around the school. They could collect data as far as different kind of test scores, quiz scores, students' weights, students' heights, and then find a random sample or just in the classroom do that and have different groups do different things. In one class, a group of 3 or 4 could find the average height and the average weight, and basically they could have a test score and a quiz score and use that data, but it would show how easily we can gather data, organize it, and then come up with statistical information about it. That basically tells us how the data tends to centralize itself, and of course we'd want that one piece of data that tells how the data spreads out. That would be the range. Well, this was a nice simple exercise and activity on measures of central tendency with the range. We will have activities about that for you to work on, and I hope to see you in the next session.